It's the Knicks, Jets, etc. podcast with Alex Trataros, John Meleka, and Raisi on the beat. Let's go.
What's good, everyone? Alex Trataros here with another Knicks episode of the Knicks, Jets, etc. podcast. And with me is always my buddy, my cousin, pal, the man with the plan, the one and only John Meleka. But before we ask John how he's doing today, guys, you know what it is. If you listen to this podcast on any audio listening platform, whether that's Apple, Spotify, Google Play, Amazon, Alexa, Stitcher, you name it, we are there. Please make sure to subscribe. And if you listen to us on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to give us a 5-star rating. And if you listen to us on Apple, please make sure to leave a comment. We're also on Fanside, so if you go to the Jet Press or the Daily Knicks, you'll see our podcast embedded there if you don't listen to us on any of those platforms. We also got a YouTube page, Knicks, Jets, ETC, period. Make sure to subscribe, hit that notification bell. That way you know when a new episode drops. And when you watch a video, hit the like button, leave a comment, let us know what you're thinking, add to the conversation. We love to engage with you guys. You know the drill. And while you're over there, we got Winning Picks Weekly. John and video producer Greg usually go down the NFL slate, give you all their takes on betting. But don't worry, they're covering everything else. They got Masters going on, so they did that. They got baseball going on. They got everything covered. Everything.
NBA
if you want to do overs,
man.
unders.
NBA playoffs right around the corner.
Yeah, I'm going to need to listen. I need to tap into that. I'm going to have to fast forward to that section and get my ass ready for that one. But then, guys, last and certainly not least, we're on all social media platforms. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, you name it. We are there. My man, John, how you feeling today, bro? How you doing?
What's up, man? I'm good. We had a little delayed opening day, which left it all for Masters galore. I mean, if you're not using the Masters website and just like going through all the screens, we had Tiger and his comeback today. It's been a hell of a day for sports, hell of a week. NBA coming to a close. Every game matters. Even the ones that technically don't, they're still fun to watch. And I'm just looking ahead. Basketball's over, man. our basketball season's over. I'm excited to watch. Be actually entertained by real NBA players. League Pass was just a side thing, and now it's the whole thing. So I'm excited to get into the playoffs, man, where I think we're going to have a repeat of last year. So I'm excited, man. How you doing?
I'm doing good, man. For as good as I can be. I mean, we watched the Knicks game yesterday, against the Brooklyn Nets. I really wanted that one.
Forget about it.
Well, man, I sent out a tweet trying to be a little optimistic, a little moral victory, even though I'm not a big moral victory guy, because we had a lot of young guys out there, right? Running around. They showed some promise for 3 quarters. Well, I should say for 3 quarters, up until the last 3 minutes of the game. That's really where it was. We were like, okay, I could see some growth out of these guys, see some pause. I could see some like development coming from like RJ, Emmanuel quickly and so forth. But people are out there saying, but they lost, they beat the Heat. It's like, okay, guys, let's relax. I could be a little optimistic on what I just saw last night. We don't have to be all doom and gloom all the time. What we see now is much different than the Lance Thomas, Isaiah Hicks, Luke Cornett time period, all right? So let's not go down that road. But, John, we got a guest today, man. We got a wonderful guest today. We got Joe Mullinax, site manager of SB Nation's Grizzly Bear Blues, all right, and host of the Grizzly Bear Blue live on SB Nation's podcast network. Joe, what's going on, my man? How you feeling today?
I'm doing okay, guys. I'm sorry to hear that you're so down and out. I can't relate. I can't relate to that in any way, shape, or form. Things are just going really well for us that cover the Memphis Grizzlies and follow them. They're doing some good things. I know it's such a drastic fall for the New York Knicks fan. Last year, things were going so well. Everybody loved Tibbs, and Julius Randle was the greatest thing since sliced bread. And all of a sudden, that all came tumbling down very quickly. And they might fire Tibbs before the Lakers get rid of their head coach Vogel. So
I don't know about all that.
It's pretty remarkable how
go home.
But at the same time, like the Lakers just won a championship 2 years ago. You know what I mean? So I don't know if it's a big market thing or what, but it's just fascinating to see. I'll use the NFL's Pittsburgh Steelers as an example. Like they'll have, they're pretty consistently good or above average, but there's plenty of years where they're not, they're 9-8 or 8-7, whatever the record is now in the NFL, and they don't get rid of Mike Tomlin. They don't cut coaches loose. Tibbs, I'm pretty sure, was coach of the year last year, and they're saying that they want to fire him the season after. Frank Vogel won a championship 2 seasons ago, and now he's going to be cut by the Lakers for something that isn't his fault. Yeah, investing in Russell Westbrook is not something I'm guessing he thought was a good idea, or at least didn't initiate that conversation. So I'm just kind of surprised that the Knicks are so willing, or at least fans of the Knicks are so willing to move on from someone who so recently had such great success. In Memphis, Taylor Jenkins is a made man, top 3 coach of the year candidate. We've got Jaren Jackson Jr., defensive player of the year in the mix. Ja Morant is almost certainly going to be most improved player, but he doesn't want that. He wants to be the MVP, which he's not going to win. But, there's Desmond Bane. There's all sorts of good things happening for the Memphis Grizzlies. So that was a long-winded way of saying that it really sucks to be you guys. And if you want to join the Memphis Grizzlies fan base for the next few months, come on board. We have plenty of room.
Well, listen, man, as resident Knicks fans, there's one thing that you have to do. You have to get League Pass during the year, and you have to find your League Pass teams, because you just can't find sanity and happiness in basketball if you just watch the Knicks. So
Sure.
The Grizzlies are one of our, we've had it, especially our podcast, is one of our League Pass teams. So we've been all over the Grizzlies, and especially since Ja Morant, as you mentioned, and our boy RJ Barrett, they're tied forever together. So we always have to keep tabs on Ja Morant, see what's going on over there. And the Grizzlies, honestly, ever since, the good old Zebo Grizzlies, they play that gritty type of, old school Knicks basketball that we love so much. So, that's, and, I'm not going to take into account the fact that we always get into a fight, right? The Memphis Grizzlies and the Knicks when they play each other, right? We'll leave that a little bit to the side. I actually do kind of like the squad, but it's interesting that you brought up, Tibbs and Randle right away from the jump. This podcast has been pretty adamant about keeping Tibbs. I was the resident Randle apologist for most of this season, honestly, because he was, like you said, the most improved player, the best thing since sliced bread. We hated him, and then we loved him. He was a savior, and then we hated him again. All within like 20 games, like literally like every 25 games, we want to either, give this guy an extension or cut him. So we're with you, and we were on the Tibbs bandwagon, especially more than Knicks Twitter or Knicks fan base. So we want to get your outside perspective, especially from, a productive team right now. Like, what do you think about the Knicks? What do you think about the Knicks when you see them on the schedule? When we played you guys a couple of times, I was at that game, when you came to the Garden, pretty gritty matchup. And what's your, take on Randle and Tibbs? There's a bit of a, a question mark about Randle's actual value to the league, right? Because of course we think he's now worth, a Danilo Gallinari, but last year he was MVP in our brain. So, we just want to get the outside perspective.
Sure. Well, again, I think the Knicks were really good last year, and it's the sign of a dysfunctional franchise. And I say this as someone who has covered a dysfunctional franchise between the grit and grind era and what the Grizzlies are currently being, which is not the same at all, but they're having similar success at least. I think that it's fair to say that the Grizzlies were fairly dysfunctional. The end of the Chris Wallace's GM regime did not go well. And they had a couple of years. One of the reasons they have Jaren Jackson Jr. and Ja Morant is they had high lottery picks, right? So I think that that's important to point out. Like, it's not like the Grizzlies have been awesome this entire time. There were some lean years there at the start of my run as site manager. I think that the thing about the Knicks that always stood out to me from watching from afar was I feel like they hitched their wagon to Kemba Walker a little bit. And I thought that made more sense as a scapegoat, even though it's not entirely fair to blame Kemba because Randle did regress Tibbs obviously is Tibbs. You know, he does questionable coaching things, but he's always done that. So you kind of know what you're getting with Tom Thibodeau when he's your head coach. I always thought that, and maybe I just don't see it enough because I'm not as active in that community, but, you know, Kemba Walker was supposed to be a lot more than he is. And I think, you know, Derrick Rose, I believe, has had health concerns or health issues this season. He's been in and out of the lineup for y'all. You mentioned RJ Barrett and quickly earlier. That's been a positive. I'm a big fan of, I might mess up his name. Mitch Robinson, I think is his name. Mitchell Robinson. I like him a lot. I think his free agency is going to be fascinating because I don't know what his value is. He's very good specifically in specific things. And I think he's very limited in other areas. So what he looks like in 2022 as a legitimate free agent big man is going to be interesting to me. Barrett is awesome. He made that missing out on Ja by one pick look a little less bad. Obviously, the Knicks couldn't control what Memphis was going to do. But, you know, Barrett wanted to be there, and RJ's had a good season of growth. And I think that he's showing some things that he could be on a good Knicks team, maybe the second best player. The key is finding that alpha, right? And the Grizzlies are fortunate in having Ja Morant. He's very clearly that alpha kind of guy. I think Barrett is more in the mold of a Klay Thompson second guy on a really damn good team. On a first team or as the number one guy, he's probably a playoff caliber team, but they'll have a ceiling. They got to try to find a way to bring in that next dude. And that's kind of been the story for the Knicks for years now, right? How are they going to get that dude to come to New York and not go to the other borough over in Brooklyn? I think that's going to continue to remain a story. And, you know, Barrett's
sensitive topic.
Key.
Sensitive topic.
Yeah,
right now.
I know. I'm sorry for bringing it up.
Especially with KD and Kyrie really bringing it up last
right.
night, too.
Yeah, but I think that they're just a good draft pick away. You know, I think that's probably the most realistic way for them to do it is in the long term. And that's how Memphis has kind of done it. They got lucky with Ja, admittedly. But, you know, Jaren Jackson Jr., Desmond Bane, Brandon Clark, you know, these are all guys that have been drafted into the program that are bought into what the system is. They talk about the Grizzly standard all the time. The culture that's been established is impressive. I think it's fair to ask, what is Knicks culture? And if you can't answer that question, then I can tell you why you're not very good. You know, the Warriors have a culture. I think it's fair to say the Grizzlies now have a culture. The Suns appear to have a culture. You know, there's no coincidence that three of the Heat, good Lord, Heat culture they talk about all the time, ad nauseum. You know, everybody talks about having a culture and an identity. I don't know that New York has that. The best way to do it is also one of the hardest ways to do it because you have to display delayed gratification. You know, the Warriors sucked for a while, you know, before Steph and Clay and Draymond got in
for
there.
Sure.
The Grizzlies had a couple of lean years. The Suns obviously were struggling for a time. So I think that it's important to acknowledge that it takes time to build a really good franchise in terms of a roster. And teams like the Knicks and the Lakers, and it's funny to say the Lakers because they won the title 2 years ago, but I'll use the Knicks as a better example. You run out of patience. And when you run out of patience and you feel like you have to hit the reset button, you're starting the process all over again. I don't think the Knicks are as far away as maybe their fans think they are. And obviously New York is in a position where they can kind of build upon what they've done. If they can clean up their cap sheet a little bit, I don't see any reason why the Knicks can't be back in the play-in and back in the playoff conversation. I mean, the play-in in the East, Atlanta's not scary long-term. There's plenty of room. Right. I think there's room for New York to get back to where they were and then maybe even be better. They just have to be smart about how they spend their money and not just go out try to find the flashy guy. You know, it's important to be deliberate in your movements and what you do. And I think the Knicks need to get back to that.
Yeah, no, Joe, that was like very well said and very like about the whole Knicks. And I agree. And you know, I think when you talk about culture for the New York Knicks, like we have the culture's there. It's to play hard, play gritty, play defense, and to take open 3-pointers and put up as much shots and try to get out in transition. Now, the thing is with that, from our perspective, is that we put that on Julius Randle. And even though we weren't the fastest paced team last season, Randle led us to do a lot of those things with the help of Nerlens Noel, who was a stonewall last season, right? We had Reggie Bullock, who's a really good wing defender. Elfrid Payton, for as much as fans hated him, he was still a decent enough defender, even though he didn't really offer much offensively, right? And we had that identity last season, and it's fell off this season because we changed in investing in someone like Evan Fournier, who's not really known as a defensive guy, Kemba Walker, who's not known as a defensive guy. And this is where I put blame on the offense, on the front office, I should say, because as you said at the beginning, you know what you're getting out of Tibbs. Like you yourself said that. And, you know, I'm also a contributor to Knicks Fan TV as the senior editor over there. I'm a co-host for the post game. And I was saying that last night, you know, I blame the front office because you know who you're getting. Leon Rose has known who Tom Thibodeau is. We've seen Thibodeau's work of like his entire portfolio of work, right? That he's going to be a defensive first guy. Offense is going to be pretty limited, a lot of isolation basketball. So if you're going to have a successful team, you need defense. And that structure is still there. When you watch the kids, like when you watch our youth play, whether it's RJ Barrett, whether it's Quentin Grimes, Deuce McBride, all these guys who are under the age of 25, they're all playing defense. The thing is, though, because we signed Kemba Walker, Evan Fournier, you have Alec Burks, who's okay defensively. You have to play these guys over the kids because that's where you put most of your money into, and you can't justify just sitting them for extensive periods of time. Sure, Tibbs could have managed the minutes better and try to like finagle getting more like time out of Obi Toppin, maybe get Quentin Grimes in there sooner. Maybe you could have found spot minutes for Miles McBride earlier in the season, but that's the reason for our setback. And I agree. I don't think we're that far away. The thing is that's going to be complicated is how do we clean the cap sheet in order moving forward? So I agree with that 100%.
Dude, Joakim Noah coming off the books, baby. Don't worry.
Finally. Finally. Last season.
That's a positive thing. That's a positivity. Yeah.
We're on the way, baby. We're on the way. We have some tradable
On the up and up.
contracts. We have some tradable contracts, you know, even including Fournier, which everyone's freaking out about. He did break our 3-point record for single season this year. Noel injured, but everybody's contract is 1 year less than it's been reported because there's team options. Besides Fournier, he has a player option, right? So, you know, it all stems for us. You mentioned it at the point guard position, right? Tibbs, as Alex said, doesn't have an offense. He's limited, and it's a lot of ISO ball, and he relies on the point guard, right? Everywhere he goes. Here, that was our problem last year. Elfrid Payton, obviously not getting it done. D-Rose was, so we decided to, you know, get Kemba Walker. That didn't work out within officially 20 games, but I'll say probably 7 games. Like 7 to 10 games just wasn't working out. And so you're trying to put a Band-Aid, you know, an injured Band-Aid, you know, to try to fix something. And that's our issue. And that's one of the main reasons, you know, why we have questions for you, man, because you have one of those point guards. You have one of these guys that are rumored to come to the Knicks because we're desperate, dude.
Whoa. You cannot have Ja Morant. I'm going to cut that off with your big market stuff. Nobody you have we're trading Ja Morant for.
We don't want
okay?
I mean,
I know how you big markets work. I've seen the Lakers Photoshops already. I'm sure there's New York Knicks ones floating out there. No,
that's such a bad
Ja Morant's off the table. Oh, you're talking about Tyus Jones.
I blame the New York Post.
If you're talking about Tyus Jones, maybe
I blame the New York Post for all of this.
Tyus Jones maybe is a little more realistic. I'm sorry. I prejudged you as big market guy. I thought you were gonna try to give me Julius Randle for Ja Morant. I apologize.
No, that's not this. That's not this podcast. It is tough out here, and that's not this podcast. But we're not the ones out here showing, you know, a Reggie Bullock and Julius Randle, like even last season to try to get someone Zion.
Zion rumors. Yeah,
but look, like I mean, we would love Ja Morant, but we know that's very unrealistic. But yes, Tyus Jones, man. There's been there's been talks amongst, especially in Knicks Twitter, where Tyus Jones could be a good option because I think the thing that people look at as of right now is that he really is a prototypical point guard. Brings the ball up, looks to distribute, has a low assisted turnover ratio, and people look at that and they say there's something there. And when you watch him play, he's a good player. Like I'm not taking that away from him. You know, Tibbs had him before, traded him when he was in Minnesota, but watching him how he has developed on the Memphis Grizzlies and leading that second unit and even stepping up for when Ja is missing time, you know, it's kind of like the campaign of last season where, there could be room for this guy to even take it to another level? Because what if he gets thrusted into that starting role? Could he produce at a higher level? Because what he's doing right now in his limited role and being so efficient, it's very appealing. So let's get first of all, before we get into like money and all that stuff, let's get the details on Tyus Jones and what is Memphis fans' feelings on Tyus Jones? What is your thoughts on Tyus Jones? Give us paint us the entire picture, man. Give us that Picasso painting.
I think Tyus Jones is the best backup point guard in the NBA. I don't know that it's particularly close.
Jalen Brunson is not happy with you right now.
See, and I don't know that I would count Jalen Brunson. I guess it comes down to positional if you consider Luka a true point guard and all that stuff. I would rather, this is maybe the Memphis bias, I would rather have Tyus Jones for the reasons I'm impressed that you outlined there. He is the true prototypical point guard in that he creates offense for others and he doesn't make mistakes. You mentioned his assist to turnover ratio. It's not just good, it's elite. It's the very best in the NBA. And I think he's on pace to break NBA records for the best assist to turnover ratio in the entire history of the National Basketball Association for a single season. So he is doing remarkable things, protecting possessions. And for a team like the Grizzlies, we've known this for a while in Memphis, but the big Achilles heel entering the postseason is our half court offense. I think we're 22nd or 23rd in the league in the half court. We're elite in transition. We have John Morant, all these other dudes, like it's watching a track meet sometimes. But when you get us in the half court, things get interesting. And Tyus Jones protects possessions, and you need as many possessions as you can get to score the basketball. I'm a big fan of that. So I like that Tyus protects the ball. He has shown the ability to shoot the three at a higher percentage than normal, which I think is important to point out. He's having a career year in that way. If I'm being a fair, unbiased analyst here, I don't know how long that holds. You kind of got to go with precedent and historical. In his contract year, is he really going to be a 38% 3-point shooter the rest of his career? I can't say he will be.
It's even higher now, man. Every time
because he had a really good game. You're right. He was like 4 for 4. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, he's close to 40%, my man.
Yeah, I don't. I think that might be a bit of fool's gold. I'm not sure it's going to stick. But I do think it will be improved from what his career average is, which I don't have it in front of me. I think it's 34 or 35%, something like that. The truth is probably in the middle, is what I will say about Tyus. And I think that the assist to turnover ratio thing is the big thing. I think he's a starting point guard on a team that has a lot of scoring options around him. He doesn't have to be the lead scorer. One of the big reasons everybody floats the 20-3 thing now, because they lost to the Jazz in overtime on Tuesday. The Grizzlies are now 20-3 without John Morant this season. And they say, oh, well, that's why John Morant's not the MVP. Memphis is just a really good team. Well, they have Tyus Jones, who enables them. He can score when he needs to. He can facilitate offense. He can create possessions. He's an excellent team defender, which he probably got from his time with Tibbs before he left Minnesota, learning the importance of playing within scheme defensively. Taylor Jenkins is underrated in that way. The team defense of Memphis is pretty stout. At least it has been the first 20 games of the season, it was rough, but the last 55 or so, it's been, one of the best in the NBA. I think Tyus is a big piece of that. That's one of the reasons they play better, in air quotes, without Ja is much more, I'm going to create turnovers. I'm going to attack the passing lanes. I'm going to try to get stocks and deflections and all those things. Tyus is much more sound in terms of what he does within the scheme of Memphis. And I think that would obviously benefit the Knicks too. Obviously, he's a free agent. You said we'll talk about the money more in a moment. His value on the market is going to be fascinating to watch. There's only a few teams that have cap space. You mentioned Jalen Brunson. It sounds like the Pistons are going to be all in on trying to get Brunson. Detroit's one of the few teams that has the money to possibly pay Tyus. And then if you're starting to talk mid-level exception, Memphis is maybe second best record in the NBA, but I think we all could agree we're first place in vibes. I would say the vibes are immaculate when it comes to the Memphis Grizzlies.
After the Suns.
So, well, no, I'm talking about vibes. I'm not talking about record. I'm talking about vibes.
Yo,
Chris Paul is the angry dad.
Yeah, but
Chris Paul is the angry dad who is, he yells at them at home and tells them to turn their music down. No, the vibes wise, it's the Memphis
D-Book
Grizzlies.
is showing up
No,
in
no.
86 Cadillacs.
Desmond
He's
Bain
chilling.
single-handedly destroyed the Los Angeles Lakers season. LeBron James said, "Get off my yard" to Desmond Bain. They went like 4-20 after that. So
this is a Desmond Bain podcast. You should have listened to us pre-draft.
He's
we were
phenomenal.
all over Desmond Bain.
I love Desmond Bain.
So do we.
So anyway, I think with Tyus, it's going to be interesting to see if the mid-level exception is all he can get, and you have to choose between, another playoff team and staying in Memphis and knowing you're going to start games, because I think it's fair to say at this point, Ja is going to sit out at some point in terms of injury. He just plays a style that, he's going to need 15 or so games off every year. So you're going to get a chance to start. Yeah, violent. That's a good way to describe how he plays. You're going to get a chance to start some. You're going to be on a team that's ascending. They're not peaking yet. If he doesn't care about starting, I don't know why he would ever leave Memphis if the mid-level exception is all he can get. But what others have started to point out, and I've said for a while now, the idea of sign and trades. And I think that is where the Knicks could potentially get involved for Tyus Jones, pay him maybe a little more than Memphis is comfortable paying, 12, 13-ish million a year to be their starting point guard. And the Grizzlies can get something back in return for Tyus departing. And that allows for New York to not have to do as much to their cap sheet as they would to just sign Tyus outright. So to me, that's probably, if Tyus leaves, that's the most likely way it'll occur, because it expands the market, allows for more teams to be in on trying to acquire him. And it also helps Memphis too. Zach Kleiman, the GM of the Grizzlies, he rarely does things without a kickback for Memphis in some way, shape, or form. So I think that Tyus Jones would fit the Knicks well. I don't think he raises your ceiling necessarily, but I think you're definitely a playoff team with him running your offense, because now RJ Barrett doesn't have to do as much facilitation. Now Julius Randle definitely, because I know even at his peak, he was doing some pretty impressive things with assist numbers and helping to facilitate offense. It allows for them to narrow their vision, if that makes sense. Tyus takes care of a lot of that. And when he has the opportunity, he has an elite floater, one of the best floaters in the NBA. We mentioned the 3-point shooting. He is underrated in terms of creating his own offense, but the numbers back up the eye test when it comes to creating for others and protecting those possessions, which is just so important, especially for a team like the Grizzlies right now.
For sure. And everything you said, is why people are in on Tyus Jones. But I want to bring back to what you said at the beginning. You said he was like, a really good backup? And do you think he's just a backup in this league, or do you think he can be a starter in this league moving forward? Because if the Knicks are to do a sign and trade, he is, we haven't had the point guard for this team in a very, 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 very long time. We did the Band-Aid situation with Raymond Felton and Jason Kidd. John always likes to bring up Stevie Franchise, the one Steve Francis.
Tough years, man. Tough years.
Very tough years. I mean, as long as it's not Tony Douglas, bro, I don't want to remember those years. But do you think he can be a starter in this league? On a team that especially needs a point guard, and looking at the Knicks and how they're currently constructed, right? It would be a sign and trade. And I want to get your takes on, if the Knicks were to do a sign and trade, who would the Grizzlies want? But if Tyus Jones goes to the Knicks, do you think he is still that same player that we're seeing right now on the Memphis Grizzlies?
Yes and no. I think that the Knicks are attractive because he's familiar with that system. That's important to point out, the connections. And you always hear those like in the cliff notes or the afterthoughts of all these transactions. This player and this coach worked together 5 years ago, or this agent has a connection. There's always these lines of sight between point A and point B when it comes to NBA transactions like this. I think he could be a starter on a playoff team. I think that's realistic. Like I said, if he's one of your top 3 players, you're going to not be very good, or your ceiling will be very finite, right? You're not going to get beyond a certain point. He's an excellent role player. He knows his role. He does his job well. Starters can be role players too. Obviously, you're not going to trot out 5 stars and hope things go okay. You need guys to do that work that your stars aren't going to be able to do and still do the things that make stars stars. So I think he's really good at those particular things. But his value is limited by what he is in terms of positionality. He is only a point guard, right? Like he is only a point guard. So one of the reasons people bring up, we need to keep Tyus 3 years, $45 million, get it done. I don't want to spend $15 million on a guy who's going to be a backup point guard. And how much he can play behind or next to John Morant is questionable. Like it's going well this year, but that doesn't mean when the West is a hell of a lot tougher next year and the backcourts get bigger, Jamal Murray's back, Kawhi Leonard's back, all these guys are healthy. That doesn't mean that you're going to be able to play John Tyus all that much together. And do you really want to, because Jaw's going to get a super max and deserve it. Do you really want to have that much money tied up in the point guard position? I don't necessarily want that much money if he can't play multiple positions. So it would come down to what your guys' backcourt looks like. Do you have multiple guards that can handle and allow for Tyus to still be that traditional one guard, point guard type of player? Because he's not, if you have multiple undersized guys, bigger backcourts are just going to eat you alive. He doesn't have the capacity to be able to handle that well. He just physically can't do it. So that's why he is a backup in the here and now. He doesn't have to be, if that makes sense. He needs to go into a situation that is more conducive to him being able to have flexibility around other guys. If he is the point guard and then you have multiple twos that can kind of cycle around him and then also be able to handle a little bit, that's better than what Memphis currently has. Because DeAnthony Melton is 6'3", I think. Bane is 6'4", 6'5". They don't have an RJ Barrett, who's a bigger guard that can handle, a bigger wing that can handle. I think Brooks is their biggest guy that's like that at 6'7" now. Kyle Anderson is more of a big man at this stage of his career. So they don't really have what the Knicks and others do that would enable Tyus to be more flexible in a backcourt pairing. Ja is Ja, but Ja is also, you're not moving Ja to shooting guard. Ja is going to be that lead ball handler at all times. And if he's out there with Tyus, maybe you have screens for Ja trying to get to the basket. Ja Morant's improved as a 3-point shooter, but he's kind of similar in Tyus. Like, is he really that good of a 3-point shooter? We'll have to see that over the span of time. I don't know that Tyus's fit for the money makes sense in Memphis, whereas in a place like New York, if you have a bigger backcourt, that flexibility can be found elsewhere.
Yeah, to be fair to Tyus Jones, though, I understand it's a contract year, and Alex and I are super weary of that, whether it's our NFL players, but if you want to stick to basketball, and somebody you mentioned, Mitch Robinson, this year, and Julius Randle last year, almost everyone, D Rose, everyone who needs a contract, Noel, played well for us, and we are very weary of that. But to be fair to Tyus Jones, his minutes per game didn't really have that much of a career jump, but his usage, besides his efficiency, obviously skyrocketed, but his usage changed. And, he was able to start games. He was, super efficient from the three, like you said, but his attempts went up. It's not like, he would just shoot one now because he's not asked to do as much of a role because Ja Morant is there. So to be fair to him, he was able to step up when the star player wasn't there. That we don't know about Jalen Brunson. Like, we know that Jalen Brunson could play next to Luka. We know that he could, come in off the bench for sporadic minutes. We know that they could play together, but we don't know that he can carry the team like Tyus, like creating for himself, creating for his other team, picking up, even rebounds here and there, which our guards don't usually get. So we're not used to that. Just the gritty type of ball that we're kind of looking for. And, the one thing about the Knicks, I'll say, is we wouldn't be signing Tyus Jones to be that bona fide number one starter. You could tell by the way we treated, Fred VanVleet, for example. He was a better version, excuse me, of Tyus Jones. And we were like, nah, we don't know if we could still keep him alone. We don't know if we could overpay him. So if Tyus Jones were to come in, I would imagine that we'd still have IQ, obviously RJ, maybe a Grimes / Fournier, like some sort of shooting guard there. D Rose obviously still there. So I think we could surround him with talent.
For sure.
Probably so.
I agree.
I think, and sorry to cut you off, the interesting thing about the Knicks as a fit for me is you have so many guys like an Alec Burks. You know, you got other pieces
Starting
that,
point guard. How can I forget?
yeah, right. Like in theory, you have a guy like that who, and that would probably be one of the guys I'd want back if I was Memphis in a sign and trade.
Okay.
Well, we can talk more about that. But looking at your roster, if I'm being honest with you, it's kind of thin.
No, don't trust me. I
It's
get
just
it.
Burks or Mitch,
Yeah.
right? Who else is there?
But well, I mean, quickly's interesting, but you guys, again,
Okay.
like you just kind of said, that would kind of defeat the purpose. I do think that one of the fascinating things about Tyus with this Knicks team, if it were to come to pass, is he would enable those guys to not have to create so much offense for themselves. They could, be more catch and shoot. It could vary their offense more. There's not as much isolation unless Tibbs just does that and that's all he does. That wasn't necessarily what Tyus did when he played for Tibbs. You saw them have more catch and shoot opportunities. And I do think that would enable their offense to evolve a little bit.
For sure. So Joe, you just mentioned Alec Burks, who, if you look at these tired eyes, we've had to watch Alec Burks play point guard since Kemba Walker, who has stopped doing that. And even before that, when he got benched.
Yeah,
So,
it's been a rough year for you guys in point guard play. Yeah, that's
man,
a
this
good
entire
point.
season has been a rough year. Okay. I think most Knicks fans are ready. I think most Knicks fans are ready for the season to be over and watch the last two games. But you mentioned Alec Burks, you mentioned Mitchell Robinson, you mentioned IQ. So let's talk about the sign and trade then, right? So I'm guessing that you're thinking that Tyus Jones, because you keep saying it, and the max is like 15 mil annually is what he's looking to get, something more than the mid-level exception.
And that's, but I don't want to put words in Tyus's mouth. He hasn't talked about free agency.
Right.
I'll say in the Memphis market, the amount has floated between 10 to 15 million dollars has been what we see. Some people are on the lower end, some people are on the higher end. Maybe you say 12 and a half just to be fair. And that probably, because obviously the mid-level exception goes up every year as the cap goes up. If you front load a contract with the mid-level exception, 12 and a half is probably a realistic number for him.
For sure. So, but if you're looking at like, what was it, 10 to 15, anywhere in that range, we're talking about the guys who the Knicks have signed, which is like a Derrick Rose. You're talking about Alec Burks. You're talking about Nerlens Noel. Those are guys that you could do a one-off trade and for someone like Tyus Jones. And it's interesting you put Alec Burks first, because if you're looking for a guard that can play next to John Morant, who offers, size, length, he is 6'6". He can score in isolation. This season, he hasn't been able to show that, why he was a good bench scorer last season. But when he is put in his role as like a 6th, 7th, 8th guy, like he was in the 90th percentile in isolation scoring last season. And not saying that he's like some magically gifted isolation scorer because of the matchups against second units. But if you're looking for someone to have running like some minutes with the first unit, running next to John Morant, or if you want someone on that second unit, you need some scoring and you got to throw the ball to somebody just to create something, that's someone in Alec Burks. And if you're saying Tyus Jones and Alec Burks are going to have the contracts, and for the Grizzlies, if you look at Burks, he's a bench guy. That's really what he's always been throughout his entire career. You don't have to pay him that much. He got rewarded by the Knicks because we had a lot of cap space and we had to use it. So is Alec Burks then a player that the Grizzlies are looking for, because he's kind of fitting the mold of what you're talking about as a guard that can do that?
He's a nice Grizzly.
Yeah, I can actually
Don't try
see
to
him
pass
as a
off your Alec Burks garbage.
I love Burks.
I know what you
Burks...
big markets are doing. First off, you have John Morant in a Photoshop jersey.
Oh my God.
And now you're trying to just pass off Alec Burks like he's not complete trash. I know what you guys are up to.
If I bring up Nerlens Noel, that's totally fair.
if that's it, Nerlens Noel. If we were trying to swindle you, we would be handing you Nerlens Noel in a heartbeat.
We wouldn't tell you. We would not mention that he can't catch. We would not say it out loud.
In fairness to you, and I was ready for Nerlens Noel. I was ready if you tried to flip.
No,
I was going to be serious.
Once again, this is not that type of podcast.
Fair enough.
MVP Nerlens.
I think that what Memphis would be most interested in And this is where, obviously Nerlens probably isn't a realistic version of this. I think that once the lottery happens and you guys settle at the 11th or 12th pick, I think Memphis wants another lottery pick. And they have multiple firsts later in the draft. And I'll be honest, I would need to check the sign and trade rules because I'm pretty sure it can only be one player from the team that's doing the sign and trade. Like only Tyus could come from Memphis.
Yep.
But if the Grizzlies, I don't know if that includes picks. So maybe you guys are more familiar with the CBA in that way. Because I would, okay. Well, then that fits my logic perfectly. Yeah. I would say, because Memphis will probably have the 22nd-ish pick and the 29th-ish pick. I would say Tyus and those two picks for Burks and 11. I could see them floating that. I could see New York laughing in their face and saying no. But I also could see Memphis trying to find different ways, maybe not that particular trade, but trying to get into the lottery and get another wing in particular to try to build up their depth there. Somebody along the lines of a, Dyson Daniels from the G League. I always butcher his name, but Agbaji, I think, from Kansas. He looks like a Grizzlies player. You know what I mean? Like he's just got that vibe to him that he would be a Grizzlies wing. And then Jalen Duren from Memphis. He played for the Tigers this past year. The Grizzlies need a true 7-footer moving forward. Steven Adams probably isn't the long-term answer, although he's been awesome this year. In reality, he's had a career season for the Grizzlies, not washed like we were told during the trade last summer. Very much the opposite. But he's still probably not the long-term answer there. So I think that would be if the Knicks were open to that conversation, which maybe they're not, and you guys would know that better than me. If the Knicks are open to that possibility, because the Knicks have a ton of young talent. I don't necessarily see Memphis wanting to pick or prod any of those guys away, which New York would be open to. The question becomes, do the Knicks really need the 11th pick in that draft? And again, you would be getting two
Tyus Jones.
Yeah, I mean, but you're including, and maybe it's not Alec Burks. Like maybe Nerlens Noel would be in that conversation because Memphis is going to have over $20 million in cap space. So it could be one of those trades that can't happen until the league year starts. But Memphis could take some money in that isn't just like, it doesn't have to match up, 14 million for 14 million. There's flexibility there. So I'm acknowledging that I am probably doing to you what I accused you of doing to me, and saying that would probably be a starting point for a negotiation. The larger point being, I think Memphis would be interested in your late lottery pick. How you get there is probably not what I suggested, but it is something with that framework in mind. You get a starting point guard. You get 2 picks later in the draft to try to supplement your roster. And now you are in a spot where you can build your organization culturally a little bit more soundly. But yes, I'm acknowledging my specific offer was not the best. That would be the starting point.
If I was to say Nerlens Noel and that to get Tyus Jones, and then what was the return? What picks?
Well, he was a little cheeky because he said his 2 first-round picks, but the second one he mentioned was 29. So we're gonna get into that.
Whoa! Excuse me.
Yeah.
30th pick of the 2020 NBA draft was who?
I just have a
Desmond
question.
Bane. Desmond Bane.
A question. No. I just have a question. Like, in order for you to do that means you have to go a little far in the playoffs. So you're jumping a little ahead. So that's why I was saying you're being a little cheeky with that. So I actually want to hear your opinion about the Memphis Grizzlies and the playoffs, because you're saying 29. So we want to get into that in a little bit.
Yeah. So like, I want so like if it was for like Nerlens Noel and that 11th pick, you're saying Tyus Jones for those 2 picks, and then we get to eliminate that contract, sure. Like I could see that, but Alec Burks, like we're not talking. And this is not to say he's the greatest guy of all time, but like I said, in his actual role, he is actually a serviceable player, and that's where it feels like. I think that's a little bit more. That's a little much considering if you're saying Tyus Jones is not. He's just a guy who's going to steady the ship, and by steadying the ship, there has to be other guys around to have that ship steady who are other good scorers. It seems a little rich for the Knicks, in my opinion, but I think that's like the starting points, right? You start going high and figure out where you can meet in the middle, whether that's draft picks from this season, draft picks from next season, and trying to put whether that's protections on it and see where you go from there. We're not going to go through all of that, but I think that's somewhere in the lines where I think that's the lines of where these two teams are going. But to keep this moving along, because we do know you got to cover this game tonight. You did say the 29th pick. The 29th pick means you made it to the NBA Finals.
They have the second best record in the NBA.
As my man said, huh?
Yeah.
They have the second best record in the NBA.
Yeah. Yeah,
they do, and I'm not taking. I'm not taking away from that.
Second best vibes in the West.
First best vibes. First best. Chris Paul cannot be on any team that has the best vibes in the league.
You both are missing.
Come on now.
If we're talking about vibes, let's just go to the Golden State Warriors. Everyone looks like they're chilling. They're hanging. You got Klay Thompson riding on boats, drinking beers and whatnot. Everyone's investing in tech out there. Everyone's just chilling out in San Fran. Let's keep that one a buck. But I want to know, man. We want to know the Memphis Grizzlies, man, because it's not like they came completely out of nowhere. Like they were good last season. They just took another step in their development as a very young team moving forward. I listened to the shout out to the mismatch with KOC and Chris Vernon. I get to hear Chris Vernon go off every 2 days for that podcast and how he loves the Grizzlies and how he's hyped. But what is it, man? Like, tell us about these Grizzlies. How are you guys feeling about the playoffs? You got that around the corner. Like you said, second best team, man, second best record. Like that's a massive jump and the trajectory is that even if they don't make the finals this year, if they make let's say their second round, like they go 7 games in the second round.
That's their issue. The second round is going to be their first issue.
So if they do that, I feel like that's still an accomplishment because there's still a lot more for this team to do moving forward because they're so young. But what are the feelings in Grizzly Nation right now, Joe?
They're a lot more concerned than they should be. Everything you just said is exactly right. They're very young. They are a lot better right now than they were supposed to be. I think they're, 17 or 15, something like that, games better than what they were. I think their over-under was 40.5 out in Vegas. So they're well overachieving in terms of what was expected of them. I could see them making the NBA Finals. I really could. When they're playing their best basketball, the Phoenix Suns are a juggernaut. They deserve all the respect they're getting. I think Memphis can beat them in 6 games if Memphis is playing to their capability. I'm not convinced that if Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., and John Morant are all going off, that Phoenix can stop all 3 of them. I don't think they can.
How about Dallas?
Dallas makes me nervous in that you are a step ahead of me. I think that the thing about the Grizzlies is I could see them making the NBA Finals. I could see them losing in the first round. I could see Memphis losing to Minnesota if the Clippers are the 7 seed and Kawhi, the rumors of Kawhi are true. And game 1 in Memphis, Paul George and Kawhi Leonard tried out there with Norm Powell. Okay, like that's the best 7 seed in the history of the NBA. I think that's important to point out with such a young team. I don't know that they need another star anymore. People would talk about Jaylen Brown when the Celtics were struggling. Obviously, that's not going to happen anymore. But can they find a way to get the third man? I don't know that they need that anymore. I think the third man's Desmond Bane. So now they just need, another dude that can score in the half court that does like a Burks, to be honest with you, would kind of fit the bill as a bench guy on a smaller scale. Obviously, he wouldn't be a starter, but I think that they still need that, but they are not in a place where they need a Jaylen Brown anymore. In my opinion, I think Bane can be, if you're comparing them to the Warriors dynasty, Ja is Steph, Jaren is Draymond Green, slightly better offensively, Draymond Green. And if Desmond Bane plays the part of Klay, now you just got to fit these guys around those 3 and make it work. But they're still so young and they're still so early in that process. The Clippers scare me. If it's Minnesota, I think Minnesota is like the Grizzlies in a lot of ways. And I think Memphis will beat them in 5 or 6. I don't know that the Timberwolves can contend with what Memphis can do for a 7-game series. But once you get out of the first round, if it's Dallas, if it's Golden State, if it's somebody along those lines, I'm not convinced that this team has the pieces in place to be able to stop what teams are going to do to stop Ja for 7 games. We've seen it with Minnesota, to their credit. They've done a good job defending Ja Morant. More and more teams are going to get more and more creative when they have more time to break down film. How do you limit what this young team is capable of? And I worry about that. So I think that their ceiling is the finals. I believe that in my heart, that they could make the NBA finals. I also believe they could lose in 6 games in the first round. Like, that wouldn't surprise me. None of it would be disappointing to me because they are so young and they have 2 first-round picks since the Lakers screwed up the third one. Thanks a lot, Lakers, garbage franchise. Since the Lakers screwed that up and Pelicans are going to get that, they have 2 first-round picks. They have $20 million in cap space. They have the flexibility to make this team even better. And Zach Kleiman, the Grizzlies GM, over the last 3 years has done nothing to suggest that this team's not going to get better. Like, even his failures, like Justice Winslow, or, you could argue that it's slipping my mind right now. But he had another one recently. He's had a couple of missteps, but even the missteps aren't long-term missteps.
Mm-hmm.
They're smart, calculated risks that if they failed, like Justice Winslow failed. Like, that didn't work. But he gave up Jay Crowder, who shot 29% from 3 in Memphis. I hated Jay Crowder in Memphis. He's a great player everywhere else but Memphis. I kind of want the Phoenix Suns in the Western Conference Finals just so I can talk trash about Jay Crowder the entire time.
You sound like a Knicks fan. I just want you to
God, 25.3%. And people, Jay Crowder was so important to the leadership. He shot 29.3% from 3 and took shots from Jaren Jackson Jr. in a developmental year. Jay Crowder stinks. All right, that's my official take. I think that they are in a spot where they can make themselves better still, and they're still so young that as long as you can keep the perspective of that, none of this will be disappointing. As you guys know, fandom is fandom. Fan is short for fanatic. How many Memphis fans are going to be able to keep that perspective if they're knocked off by Minnesota in 7 games? That's disappointing, but at the same time, I will look at it as a fan, as a blogger, media, whatever you want to call me. Now they know what they need. And now they have the capacity to go get what they need in this last year before Jaws Supermax kicks in. And, it's all gravy in that way. Win or lose, it's a positive outcome for Memphis.
Is Ja healthy?
Yeah, I was in the pregame media availability. Coach Jenkins said the goal is for him to play one of the games this coming weekend. They have a back-to-back Saturday, Sunday to end the season in Memphis. He'll try to play one of those. I would imagine he'll be fine for the playoffs.
All right. So if that's the case, I have Memphis as an outsider who watches way too much NBA basketball. I have you guys somewhere in the middle, somewhere in between going to the NBA final. I think your cap is the Western Conference Finals, losing to Phoenix. In my opinion, I know you don't agree.
The Phoenix Suns have Jay Crowder. There's no way.
Yeah, exactly.
Jay Crowder's going to take a shot from Devin Booker at a terrible time, and I'll say, I told you. I told you so.
You're probably right in that Jay Crowder will take a shot that should have gotten to Booker at some time.
You're talking to the ESPN and NBA. That's exactly why this exact matchup will happen in the Western Conference Finals. Oh, Jay Crowder. There's so much, the 1 and 2 seed. There's so many storylines here. But dude, I'm gonna push back on one thing here. We can end on this. I think it'll be incredibly disappointing if you lose in the first round to the play-in team. Like, if you want to lose to Denver, to Golden State, or to Dallas, no problem, right? Whether that's the second round or the third round, I have no issue with that. But if you or Phoenix really, but if you're gonna lose to Utah, if you're gonna lose to the Clippers with Kawhi just coming back over his first game, and Norm Powell come back over his 4th game. If you're going to lose to McCollum, if you're going to lose to Dejounte Murray, like, that is disappointing, man. You're the number 2 seed all year. Ja's healthy. Tyus Jones about to get paid. Semi-defensive player of the year, and Jaren Jackson probably defensive second team. Like, you don't think that would be disappointment? Like, you lose in 6?
Disappointing, maybe. Maybe I didn't phrase that appropriately. I think that when I hear the word disappointed, I think like I had expectations, if that makes sense.
That's
And
fair.
my
That's fair.
expectation going into the season, before all the crazy injuries and all the COVID issues and all that stuff, my expectation was for them to win 42 games. And I would have considered that a successful season. And because we have to, nothing that this front office has done, the main transaction that they made in the offseason, on paper, they got worse. They acquired the 10th overall pick so they could take Zaire Williams, who everybody acknowledged was a project. They downgraded from Jonas Valanciunas to Steven Adams. Individually, there's no denying that. Valanciunas is a better basketball player than Steven Adams. And he's awesome. Like, he's a very good basketball player. But they knew what their team needed. They needed less shooting from Jonas, and they needed Desmond Bane to pick up those shots and Jaren Jackson Jr. to pick up those shots. And they needed a center that was going to do the work that Jonas does without the offensive usage. And that's what Adams has been. The Grizzlies essentially gave up Grayson Allen for nothing. I think Grayson Allen was 2 second-round picks from the Bucks, and Grayson is a starter for them. And if he's not a starter, he's a sixth man type for a championship contending team. Mm-hmm. But they gave up Grayson to give more minutes for Bane, give more minutes for DeAnthony Melton, who we haven't talked about as much on this show, but he's had a massive season for the Grizzlies. They have done nothing, guys, that acts like a contending team. So until their front office acts like a contending team, everything's gravy for me. I'm thrilled that they're the 2 seed. If they lose in the first round, like I said earlier, if they lose in the first round, it's going to be very clear what they're missing, and they have the capacity to go get it. So that is why I say I won't be disappointed, because if they have that failure of losing with expectations, there will have been a glaring weakness shown, and they'll be able to go address that in the draft and free agency. You know, Miles Bridges has been a name that's been floated. I think The Athletic wrote about, if something happens with Minnesota, wanting Anthony Edwards to be the man there. Karl Anthony Towns might be available. The Memphis Grizzlies could trade for Karl Anthony Towns. Like, that's not a crazy statement to make when you look at the assets that Memphis has. Whether Minnesota wants to trade him is one thing or another.
You are a 2021 Knicks fan. I don't know if you hear yourself talking about you can't believe that the Knicks are a 4 seed. You won't be disappointed in the first round. Looking for, you're going to find, the issue and solve it. Talking about trading for Karl Anthony Towns. I just want you to know, man. Just want you to know, you sound like last year's Knicks fans, and I hope it doesn't work out.
The only difference is our best player is Ja Morant, who is 22 years old. Your best player was Julius Randle, who got traded by the Los Angeles Lakers and was a journeyman by the time he had his best season. He's 27 now. Yeah, I mean, he
just
would
looks
be the
old,
third
man.
Yeah, exactly.
He would be the third oldest player on the Memphis Grizzlies. Kyle Anderson and Steven Adams are 28. Julius Randle would be 27. He'd be
Good
grandpa.
Lord, Steven Adams is only 28.
Steven Adams is only 28.
Woo. Fair. Wow, that beard makes him look like he's freaking 40.
Those Kiwi jeans.
Those Kiwi jeans, that's a fact. All right, Joe, before we get you out of here, we want your prediction. How far did the Grizzlies go?
I agree with the idea that they'll be in the middle. I think they can make the Western Conference final, I think they can make the NBA finals. I think they could get eliminated in the first round. I've got them getting knocked out in the Western Conference finals to the Phoenix Suns. I just think Monty Williams has done an amazing job there. I think Phoenix is hungry. They made that trade, right? They went and got Chris Paul. That was the dude that they needed. I don't think Memphis does that with Russell Westbrook or anything like that. But I think it'll expose that the Grizzlies need that one last piece, and they'll look for him this offseason.
All right. Well, Joe, on that note, thank you for coming on this Knicks episode of the Knicks, Jets, Etc. podcast. Please let our listeners know where they can find you.
Sure. They can find me on Twitter at Joe Mullinax. They can find the blog that I'm site manager for, Grizzly Bear Blues, at SBN Grizzlies. We've got a ton of good content coming out for the playoffs. Can't stress enough, the Memphis Grizzlies, if you don't want to cheer for Chris Paul or Jay Crowder, God forbid, cheer for the Memphis Grizzlies. The vibes are immaculate. The team's fun. And, a man in his middle, that's 35 years old saying the vibes are immaculate. Hey, if I'm confident in saying that, things must be going pretty well.
Fair.
Sounds great. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in for the next episode of the Knicks, Jets, Etc. podcast. Please make sure to go follow Joe Mullinax and just go check out his work over at SB Nation's Grizzly Bear Blues. My God, that is a tongue twister. But once again, everyone, please make sure to subscribe to this podcast. You know what to do. We're on Apple, Spotify, Google Play, Amazon, Alexa, Stitcher, you name it. We are there. If you listen to us on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to give us a 5-star rating. And if you listen to us on Apple, please make sure to leave a comment. Also, shout out to I-95 Bully, all right? I-95 Bully. I said I would read a comment if someone posted it. He gave us a 5-star rating, said, good, honest opinion without the usual Knick fans hyperbole. I-95 Bully. Appreciate it, I-95. Without the hyperbole. That's how you know, bro. There we go. Without the hyperbole. See, Joe, this ain't that type of podcast. On top of that, we're also on YouTube. So make sure to type in Knicks, Jets, etc. period. Make sure to subscribe. Hit that notification bell. That way you know when a new episode drops. And when you watch a video, make sure to hit the like button and leave a comment. Engage with us. Let us know your opinions. Add to the conversation. We'll interact. We just want to know what you guys are thinking too. We also got another podcast over there, Winning Picks Weekly. If you're into sports betting, sports gambling, John, video producer Greg, and we've recently had our boy Chip Murphy on. Go check it out. They cover everything: golf, baseball, basketball, NFL, you name it, they got you covered. And then last and certainly not least, please make sure to follow us on all social media platforms. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, you name it, we are there. Thank everyone for tuning in for another Knicks episode of the Knicks, Jets, etc. podcast. We out.
Let's go Knicks. Let's go Grizzlies, I guess.